My name's Corrigan, and this is for the EKNSDA tournament. In the closing stages of 2020, Pixar released their latest film titled Soul. The film follows Australian jazz musician Joe Gardner as he offered the gig of a lifetime with his role model, Dorothea Williams. Due to his excitement, Joe recklessly falls in an open manhole and is trapped in a coma. His soul is then transported to an existential conveyor belt that will soon deliver him to the great beyond. Over the next hour and a half, Joe travels through the afterlife in order to escape his untimely death. In this same way, the fictional Joe Gardner proves that us two in the real world battle our not so fictional deaths. Living in Western society, many people know the classic heaven afterlife, but by only paying attention to this outlook, we have closed off a whole ocean of beliefs in other parts of the world. So today, let's first start by sight reading a controversial philosophy on death. Then, let's warm up as we explore different ways humans have coped with dying. And then, let's improvise our way through our solo as we explore different views on death in the Eastern world. Existentialism is a philosophy that emphasizes the belief that individuals are the ones who determine their own fate rather than an outside force. This philosophy pushes for people to find meaning in their life by embracing their existence rather than constantly denying the fact that death is inevitable. The term existentialism was first coined by French philosopher Gabriel Marcel in the 1940s, and since then has become one of the most highly debated philosophies of all time. Friedrich Nietzsche was one of the most infamous and notable existential philosophers. He set the stage for existentialism to later blossom following World War II. In his 1889 book titled Twilight of the Idols, Nietzsche introduced his philosophy in the afterlife, in which he described every human life as a small speck in the grand scheme of human existence. Rather than life having meaning because it is your test before in heaven, Nietzsche argued that the existence of death in the first place is the reason life has meaning. Without death, there would be nothing to live for, as life would simply continue forever. Through this philosophy, Nietzsche urged people to say yes to life, rather than constantly denying the fact that death is inevitable, or dreaming about what may or may not await you following your death. While Nietzsche focused on embracing death, he was definitely in the minority, as many stories have been created that often revolve around obtaining immortality and one day escaping your death. So now that we have sight-read a controversial philosophy on death, let's warm up on different ways humans have coped with dying. English philosopher and University of Cambridge graduate Stephen Cave described in his 2012 book titled Immortality that human minds are powerful enough to conduct all the marvels we have in our world. But with this power, humans are cursed to know that at some point we're going to die. In order to cope with death, many stories have been created, which often revolve around obtaining immortality. This search for immortality and alchemy has popped up throughout history, but in this search, some rather grave affairs have occurred. For example, the earliest recorded search for immortality dates back to ancient China. The emperor of the Qing dynasty was desperate to become immortal and continue his control over his kingdom. From this desperation, he sent the alchemist Xu Fu eastward in search of immortality. Xu Fu promised the emperor he knew where to find immortality, but said he'd need both with plenty of supplies to complete his quest. Oh, and also 500 virgin girls. I need to tell what Xu Fu's true intentions were, and needless to say, Xu Fu never returned to the emperor with secrets of immortality. This story between the emperor and Xu Fu displays how eager humans can be to escape death through any means necessary. Because the emperor was given the chance of escaping death, he was easily able to be swindled by Xu Fu because death was on the table. Of course, China was not the only place in search for immortality, as to the west, alchemists in Europe were similarly trying to crack the code of death. With the revival of alchemy in the 12th century, the Philosopher's Stone came to be. The Philosopher's Stone has many capabilities, such as turning mercury into gold or silver, but more importantly, it is able to grant the user immortality. The Philosopher's Stone is seen as the epitome of knowledge and glory, and because of this, it was highly sought after during the peak of European alchemy. Overall, both stories between the Emperor of China and the Philosopher's Stone display how eager humans can be to escape death through any means necessary. But in the end, death is inevitable and will always happen, which means that these stories never truly have their stake in what happens. While these stories and fables are intriguing, they're simply that, stories and fables. But on a more serious note, the religious and cultural beliefs of many Eastern cultures are often disregarded, and they provide an eye-opening outlook onto what death truly is. So now that we're all warmed up, let's finish up this gig and improvise our way through our solo on reincarnation. Jazz is one of the most unique genres of music in the United States. Each city has their own distinctive style, such as Kansas City with bebop, New Orleans with Dixieland, and New York City with Afro-Cuban. Even though all these styles of jazz use the same instruments, the end products are very different. In this same way that perspectives on jazz vary between regions in the United States, perspectives on death similarly vary throughout the world. One such example of this is in the Eastern culture and the view of reincarnation. One common religion that believes in reincarnation is Hinduism. Hinduism currently has a whopping 1.7 billion followers worldwide, making up 15% of the world population. Countries like Nepal and India support the highest levels of Hindus and continue to cherish classic Hindu beliefs. These beliefs aim for the four goals of Hinduism, which are Artha, Kama, Dharma, and Moksha. Artha is the pursuit of security. Kama is the pursuit of pleasure. Dharma is the pursuit of a moral life. And finally, Moksha is the pursuit of salvation. This pursuit of salvation is the reason why Hindus reincarnate, as they're in search of the salvation that can be one day achieved in Brahmaloka. Brahmaloka is essentially the Hinduism version of heaven. While this process of reincarnation seems like it could continue forever, it is regulated by karma. Karma is described as the culmination of one's actions in their current and past existences, which ultimately dictates their future existences. Think of karma like balancing a scale. Do a positive deed and it helps your karma. Do a negative deed and it hurts your karma. In layman's terms, the more positive deeds you do, the more likely you are to reincarnate into a desirable situation, and ultimately the closer you are to Brahmaloka. Because of this, Hindus try to reach the highest levels of positive deeds they can through selfless acts throughout their society to help get these positive deeds to one day help better their future existences. All this talk about the East and West can be confusing though, so an easier way to look at it is to grab a book. When the West sees this book of life, they see death as the final cover, and their life on earth forever over. But when the East sees this book of life, they merely see death as the end of a chapter, and the long-term goal of achieving the salvation of Brahmaloka. So in this quest, they achieve many life stories and many journeys through their life, and through their multiple existences, and one day, hopefully achieving Brahmaloka. So today, we're able to first analyze a controversial philosophy about existentialism. Then, we're able to warm up as we explore different views on death when we look at different ways humans to cope with dying in the past, with the story of the Philosopher's Stone and the Emperor of China. And finally, but probably more importantly, we're able to broaden our horizons as we explore a different view on death in the Eastern world. While yes, my speech is essentially all about death, the bigger picture is in fact the opposite, life. In the closing stages of Soul, Joe is having a conversation with jazz artist Dorothea Williams, in which she tells Joe, I heard the story about a fish. He swims up to an older fish and says, I'm looking for this thing they call the ocean. The ocean, says the older fish, that's rich in right now. This, says the younger fish, this is water. What I want is the ocean. This seemingly insignificant story about some fish furthers the theme that it is important to value the little things in life. We're so caught up in searching for our abstract aspirations that we never truly value what is in front of our eyes. We're so determined to reach these cosmic heights that we can never truly value what we have while we are on Earth. Instead of worrying about things that we cannot control, we need to be spending more time on what we can control. And whether it be helping the person hold the door next to you, or saying bless you when someone sneezes. All these little things that you can control to help better your life and make sure that people around you are truly able to grow and have a meaningful life is what we should be worrying about, instead of worrying about what may or may not await you following your death. So overall, by broadening our horizons, humans may one day be able to truly love our ocean. Thank you.